Hi, my name is Madison Jansen, and today I want to talk about systemic racism. This is a very broad topic that I feel is always brought up, but we obviously need to have further discussion about it as you've seen the events all the way from learning about slavery to now 2020. So, what is systemic racism? In my own words, it refers to the systems that are in place now that allow this racial injustice. In another article, NAACP President Derek Johnson and his words, call systemic racism systems and structures that have procedures or processes that disadvantage African Americans. In a more elaborate definition I took from Wikipedia, which I know I'm not supposed to be taking from Wikipedia. I do like the definition though. They define it as the formalization of a set of institutional, historical, cultural, and interpersonal practices with a society that more often than not puts one social ethnic group in a better position to succeed and at the same time disadvantages other groups in a consistent and constant manner that disparities develop between the groups over a period of time. And this is stated in Comm A on September 23rd, 2020, and the article that is named What is Systemic Racism Anyway? Retrieved November 23rd, 2020. So like I said, this is a very common issue to talk about, but obviously needs to be discussed even further with everything that has happened this year. Before I start the discussion, I want to ask you a question to ponder while we discuss: how do you like to be treated? Dating back to when slavery was officially abolished, with the 13th Amendment, with a source named Abolition of Slavery, retrieved November 18th, 2020. This was on January 31st, 1865. Slavery might have been cut out of the picture for most of the world who did abide by the law, but racism was very well still there. Fast forward to Brown versus Board of Education, which the source is history.com editors, which was written in 2009 on October 27th and retrieved now November 18th, 2020. It was a landmark that ruled unanimously that radical segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. And this was in May 17th, 1954. So we went from 1865 to 1954. Let's jump even further into present day 2020. Black Americans are more likely to be shot by police and incarcerated. To back up this point, in an article by Nature, states about 1,000 civilians are killed each year by law enforcement officers in the United States. Well, what does that have to do with racism? By one estimate, black men are 2.5 times more likely than white men to be killed by police during their lifetime. And in another study, more black people were fatally shot by police and were assumed twice as likely to be armed than white people, but it was actually the other way around. White people are more likely to be armed in criminal acts than black people. We have enough evidence that tells us that action needs to be taken, which was said by Justin Nix, a criminologist at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. 1,000 deaths a year does not have to be normal, he stated. In People's L, June 19th of 2020, and in another article, which is present day, what the data says about police brutality and racial bias and which reforms might work, which was retrieved November 18th of 2020. It also stated that anger boiled when the lack of racial equality for the killing of George Floyd happened. This ignited possibly the largest civil rights protest in the U.S. history, and that was obviously over 150 years after slavery's abolition. Black Americans still don't get the same equal and common measures of opportunity, prosperity, and respect. Examples being home ownership, income, job opportunities, education, and healthcare. Some of the upcoming changes and hopefully possible solutions that might help with this will be with Joe Biden's campaign, and he is said to have substantial changes in police practices and more government investment in housing and education. As well as our current president, Donald Trump, has been working on lowering unemployment, which is excluding the numbers from when COVID hit, to help change the number of Black Americans on the street with a more equal opportunity with a stronger economy. Now that we're all more educated on systemic racism, let's go back to the question that I asked you in the beginning of this discussion. How do you like to be treated? Put yourselves in the shoes of the past ancestors who lived through slavery, as well as the people who went through the segregation and Brown versus Board. And finally, put yourselves in the shoes of George Floyd, who was unarmed and spent around the last 8.5 minutes of his life unjustifiably killed because essentially he was Black. Does that seem fair? And with an intimate, humane answer to go along and support, why?